right, it's a new year. We probably have the same things to talk about as always. Although I think this is going to be a different New Year. I don't know, maybe not. It's beautiful outside. It's like 36 degrees outside, but it's so nice. I'm not going to complain. It's a bit wet, and while the rest of the country is experiencing extreme weather advisory from like California to Illinois, and then from Florida up to Maine, somehow Indiana is being left out.
Huh. Yeah, I guess it snowed here in Detroit, but
I mean, we got
not too bad.
We got like a powdering, like a light dusting of snow, and it disappeared.
Just about the same. Yeah, I thought I had to like clean off the car window, and it just
evaporated,
came right off. Yeah.
I think it's because the Midwest is like God-fearing country, and so everyone's acting right. Because if you looked at the rest of the world where everyone's getting extreme weather, it's a bunch of people who are acting like absolute dickbags to each other.
That's funny.
Like, seriously, the whole rest of the world that's like experiencing extreme weather at this moment, there's probably I can't back this with data other than like casual observation of internet media news, but every place where some ill shit's going down, there's horrible weather.
I mean, I guess though that's just because under capitalism, horrible shit's going down everywhere constantly. Yeah.
Somehow the Midwest is unscathed.
It's going to correlate just because.
There's an algorithm out there that calculates the amount of severe weather as it relates to the square footage of pavement. I bet that exists somewhere. Somebody's figured out. Sure, yeah. If we put down X amount pounds of pavement in an area for a given area, we can expect this kind of impact over, X period of time. Because there are a lot of variables.
Yeah, I'm sure the people who do that have to look at that shit anyway to do the environmental impact study, or like the reports. Like they have to, I don't know if you remember when they basically completely changed the landscape of the west side of Bloomington by putting in when 69 came in, but also like they had to like flatten a bunch of earth and then raise earth elsewhere.
Oh yeah, like north of Bloomington.
Yeah, but it was when that happened. Exactly.
You know what I love about the redistribution of road surface for 69 now is that's
what caused the floods.
Yeah, well, when driving in the northbound lane, that used to be the southbound lane. Like when we would have been. Before 69 was started to actually get
Indianapolis
deployed.
In 45 minutes.
Yeah, but that shit sucked so bad. Now it's only like half an hour if there's no traffic. But I remember
half an hour.
Well, I drive like a grandma
to Indianapolis.
Yeah,
there's no way unless you're driving like 90 miles an hour. There's no way you're getting there in half an hour. It's like 45 minutes if you drive 80. And don't hit any traffic, but because it's 45 miles an hour, it's going to take like at least an hour to get to the south side of Indianapolis if you hit traffic. It's like 45 minutes at best, and that's why I'm like, I know I drive faster than you.
Yeah, maybe it only took me 45 minutes then, because I got there really quick the other day. Like surprisingly fast. It
was 45 minutes. There wasn't a half an hour.
Sure. No, that's reasonable.
Unless you're counting from like the outskirts of like the absolute outskirts of Bloomington.
Well, I get like on the highway immediately. Like I don't have to go through town at all.
But even still, that's like
it only takes like 10 minutes to get to Martinsville with a 70 mile an hour speed limit.
Yeah, so I guess you probably got like 38 minutes.
Yeah. Whatever it was lightning quick, and I got to Indy so quickly that I thought it's like, wait a second, it's supposed to take longer than this. What the heck? There was like no traffic. There was traffic, but nothing that I would consider actual traffic. And then there was only 2 choke points where there were construction crews, where traffic slowed down to 55.
Yeah, it says 57 minutes from Bloomington to Indianapolis currently.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm like, yeah, there's no way it was 30. It was probably 38 at best, but that's where I'm like,
Yeah, I also consider, like, as soon as I can see those smokestacks, that's when I'm in Indianapolis. I realize that's several miles before the ring and not actually in Indianapolis proper. But
oh yeah, that's definitely still Greenwood.
yeah, no, to me it's all just one big pancake of Indianapolis at this point. You only need to be specific about Indianapolis if you're going to go into it and like, or go to a specific part, but just driving around it, somebody from like, Oklahoma.
Well, the only reason, here's the thing. The reason I don't consider once you see the smokestacks Indianapolis, and only once you cross into the loop.
Yeah. Well, that's Indianapolis proper.
Because, well, not even, I mean, that's like technically Marion County, but it's really not even Indianapolis. So that's where I'm like, the only reason I even consider Indianapolis is because you're roughly like half an hour from anything on the south side there.
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
If you're like in the middle of Indianapolis, you're half an hour at least from anywhere, if not 45 minutes. So like if you go from like the Circle to 96th Street, it's going to take you at least a half an hour, if not 45 minutes. And that's true from basically anywhere from the center, like from the Circle. And that's where I mean, like, when you go to the middle of downtown Indianapolis, it's like the traffic is terrible constantly. Yeah. So you're basically like stuck, which is why if you're on the outskirts, it's suburbs now. So yeah. And that's where like,
I guess it's like Southport area, Southport, West Newton.
Yeah. That's the region, suburbs now. So that's where like, in the way that Chicago's suburbs don't really count as Chicago, and they're like definitely greater Chicago. If you talk about greater Indianapolis as if it's part of the city, that's only if you didn't grow up in that area, because those areas are so defined. It's like if you talk about Detroit, it looks like one city, but when you go here, they all talk about the little towns as if they're their own.
Oh, the boroughs are all uniquely, right, distinctly.
It's even, especially in New York, the boroughs are more like they're specific. Like the boroughs are very they're not unique to us, but to them, it's like very specific thing about each borough. So that's where I'm like, in greater Indianapolis and greater Indianapolis, like. It's definitely greater Indianapolis when you're talking about that area. But if it's like Greenwood, there's like specific things about that, or like Noblesville or Zionsville or Fishers or Geist. I mean, even down to their municipalities. So that's why like Carmel High School, they don't contribute to Indianapolis school system. So yeah. It's like the Carmel school is like way better in terms of how much they're spending per student, because they don't have to put back into IPS. So then it's like, I think it's the same for like Greenwood in terms of, because it's its own municipality, like the Greenwood people aren't paying into like the IPS school system. So that's where it's like, it is Indianapolis, and it isn't in the same way that like Los Angeles is like technically 60 miles wide. But like,
man, I remember meeting people like when I was first going to raves, like they were from Fishers, and they'd be like, "Oh, I'm from Indianapolis."
Right? Yeah. No, man.
Because nobody knows where Fishers is, but they know where Indianapolis is.
Right, and I think that's where if you're talking to somebody from Chicago, they won't know what the fuck Fishers is. But if it's like somebody from Indianapolis, and then if somebody from Fishers claimed Indianapolis, they'd be like, fuck out of here. You're not from Indianapolis. So it's just weird. Like somebody from Fishers is not from Indianapolis. And like, you're not from Naptown. Like, you're not going to claim Nap. And nobody from Nap is going to let them claim. Cause it's like, if you're from the region, but you're not from Gary, nobody from Gary is going to let you claim Gary. Because there's certain things about Gary that are specific to Gary. So if you come from fucking Maryville and you're like trying to claim Gary and you're talking around people from Gary, they're gonna fucking get mad at you and maybe even like it may escalate, which is where it's like that type of shit.
That's such strange tribalism.
It is, but that's all it is, and part of it again, it's there for a reason because you want to know who's in your tribe. And when people try to fake that they're in their tribe, like, what's up with that? Why are they doing that?
Oh, yeah.
And
well, that's just sus. Messed up.
It's always sus when somebody's trying to fake they're in their tribe in somebody else's tribe, fucking going back thousands of years, which is why people get weirded out when somebody tries to say they're from a neighborhood that they're not in 2024. So, I mean, as weird as it is, it still makes sense.
That's just like what you just said actually kind of brick-walled me there. When someone tries to claim they're from a neighborhood that they're not in 2024.
Yeah, there's a lot. That's a level of sociopathy that is like trying to overcome literally hundreds of thousands of years of fucking genetic training to identify that type of shit. So I think that's why in 2024 it's really easy to identify when somebody's like trying to claim something they're not, because we have so much genetic like predisposition to identify it. But even the people that are the best at like tricking that base level stuff eventually get found out by actual investigation, like the Rachel Dolezals and shit. So it's like, you can wear a uniform for a neighborhood or even a culture, but eventually that lack of actual identification with that thing is going to come to the surface. So it's like, I think it's funny. Yeah, like this far into human civilization, people still trying to like pretend shit.
I guess, that kind of describes the whole Santos experience.
Exactly. That's a perfect example.
And it also explains why so many seemingly like frothing at the mouth, just blustery politicians are completely backed by whichever interest group that they're backed by, because they're very similar. Man. Fucking Santos, though.
I think that so I haven't really been able to like do a deep dive on the statistics and information, but I have a running theory that the window of like capacity to lie versus when the truth catches up to that lie is like becoming a shorter and shorter window, versus like you go back 30, 40 years, people could just move and establish completely new identities. And the further they moved, the more they could exaggerate who they weren't.
Or the more they could cover up who they weren't. Some people were like,
either whatever. It's the same. It's the same end. But now there's too much of a capacity to check on people, and if anybody just gets some inkling to check, they can double check. Whereas before, even if you wanted to double check, you'd have to do so much legwork and sometimes actually travel to places to find archives to get access to the information you're looking for. Where it's like people just give up and they're not actually going to follow through. So those days of being able to outrun a real or fake identity have really closed, and I'm not sure the people who got by on those types of I don't know if people who got by on those
Man,
types of
that's like so
approaches.
much fucking effort though to create like a fake personality though.
Oh, it's a whole lot of effort. But people, man, people.
This is
So
actually a
I the
really good
whole reason,
segue into that whole like fake CEO thing.
nah, dude. I'm gonna stop right there and call something else out. Like I have had this comic book for years, and I just noticed something that is perfectly in line with what we're talking about. Some motherfucker opened this CGC book and replaced it because you can tell if something's been open. I was always like suspicious of the side, but I bought it from like a local comic book store in Bloomington, and I know they had nothing to do with it, but it's like there's a scam happening, or that it happened, where people were getting shit graded, sending the thing in, and then replacing it with a lower quality book and then selling them. So I'm realizing that's probably what happened with this one.
Mm,
But it's like, because I while you were talking about that, I just happened to like notice this one thing that's missing between, there's like a case that goes inside the grating.
yeah.
And I'm like, man, that's the type of shit that you could get away with like 5, 10 years ago. But now it's like, oh, they have
There are expectations for what the packaging should actually look like when
nah,
it's
bro.
intact,
The funny
and the
thing is,
product too.
because of the tracking now, I'm gonna be able to figure out who the fuck did that, because they have a history of who got it. Like, so it's like this person thought they were gonna get away with that shit, and it's like, oh no, whoever fucking got it registered is probably the one that did it. So it's like, man, these types of people think that they're getting over. Meanwhile, this person probably did this shit 7 or 8 years ago, 10 years ago, who knows? Because I've had this comic book for a long time and just now noticed this shit. But it's like, someone was always off to me about it. And I didn't pay that much for it. But it's like, this is where those people think they're going to get away with that shit forever. And they're willing to like throw away potentially years of their lives for like $100 at a time or $200 at a time, doing some crazy fraud type shit that's so illegal, where it's like they damaged CGC's reputation, and CGC had to come out and be like, yeah, we'll make anybody whole. I'm lucky I noticed this when I did, but it's like they can't have that shit rampant, because then that ruins their reputation.
Yeah.
So it's like, man, I didn't mean to like it's still talking about fraud, but that's where I'm like, I just realized some motherfucker pulled fraud in this chain down. The thing about it is, it's meant to be like, the whole reason you get it graded, I never got one graded like directly, but the reason you get it graded is to get proof of this specific thing being a specific quality, and the fact that people figured out a way to overcome it and then get these comics back in the market is like, that undermines CGC. So I'm like, I don't know if CGC is going to be able to sustain their influence on the market, because they were dominating the market for, I mean, they're not the only comic grading company, but it's like they are the standard. So I don't know if the fact that somebody was able to like put a bunch of man, this is fucked up. That's so wild.
I wonder if baseball cards or athletic sports cards type things have experienced this kind of.
I don't know
Like
about athletic
counterfeit.
cards, but I know Pokemon cards definitely have. Because then that's what happened with Logan Paul. He found out one of the cards he got that was supposed to be like a perfect 10 graded was a fake.
Mm, that sucks.
And then
I mean,
they like
I don't know, I don't really know that person. I'm aware of their personality, and I think they're annoying, but it still sucks to hear that somebody paid for something with expectations of like, yeah, this is this thing.
fuck them. That's what happens when that person gets a lot of money.
No,
I mean, fuck
I
Logan
mean,
Paul. I mean,
it
I
sucks
don't
when
know him
anyone buys
personally,
something and it's not what they expect it to be. That
but the
just,
only reason he got famous is because of being an absolute shit human being. So like, it's like for all of the smart business decisions he has made, he's like a terrible human being. So it's like, fuck yeah, I have zero sympathy for him for like, I mean, because he got his money back, which is
oh,
like,
well.
yeah, he got his money back. The person who did the auction, I think, got their money back too. So it's like they eventually got made whole. It's just he looked like a complete asshole because he was like out bragging about it, and it was fake. So it's like, oh, because that's what it was. It was like meant to be unopened packages too. I think he bought like an unopened box of Pokemon. It was like he got scammed in the way he scams people too. So it's like, yeah, I don't feel bad for that guy at all. But
He thought he
it
bought a
sucks that there's
Ferrari and he bought a
people.
Fiero.
Right, yeah, a Fiero with a Ferrari kit.
Yeah.
But it's like that's
Ferrario.
basically what people are doing with a lot of this shit, and it's like it sucks that if I knew I was getting a kit, I'd buy it no problem. But if somebody's trying to pass it off as a real thing and it's a kit, it's like some that's capitalism, and that's where I fucking hate that. That's what capitalism has become. Like to me, it's like people try to get you trapped. The reason I say that is like there's so many variations on getting somebody trapped in an exchange and making it more difficult for them to get out of the exchange than to just let the loss happen. And it's like that's why I if I'm honest, real capitalism doesn't work like that. Like because there was a brief period in our parents' lives where things worked, and if you bought them, you got a warranty that was either lifetime or long enough that if it broke, you fixed it. We never really experienced that. So basically, from the time we were born to now, it's been a variation on capitalism that has only gotten worse. And it's like we grew up with this standard of thinking that shit doesn't work. Our parents didn't grow up with that standard. So that's why I hate that they let that shit happen and then want to act like they didn't fucking let it happen. Cause then it's like, I was thinking about those Billy Joel lyrics earlier. We didn't start the fire. It was always burning as the world was turning. It's like, man, that's how the boomers treated fucking everything. And they just like let shit go and acted like, oh, our parents were the ones that started this problem. I'm gonna step in your grandfather's way when he wants to destroy the planet. No, he wants to drive these stupid fucking gas burning cars. We gotta let grandpa drive the cars. Now grandpa's dead, but I want to drive these stupid fucking cars to remember grandpa. And we have all these bullshit like electric cars were never about the cost. It was about fixing the fucking hole in the goddamn ozone. Now all people care about is if electric cars are cheaper than gas. And I'm like, what the fuck happened? When did people forget that we were trying to stop our like species from destroying itself? In terms of even the right wingers back in the day really had no choice but to acknowledge that like the piles of trash and the like approach to waste was becoming a problem because it was like making cities started stinking.
Oh man, before the EPA, they like every riverway that was next to a city in America was completely disgusting, and the air above every city was completely disgusting. And there are pictures of this, like photographic evidence that cannot be denied. Well, it can be denied. So there people deny everything, but we have empirical evidence gathered by scientific bodies who were dead set on recording this stuff for all time, so we know why we have environmental regulation. The thing that really gets me is that there's this incredible push to electrify, and I like it, but it doesn't
have to be electric, No, I just use that as an example.
Sure. In like China, BYD, their number one state-sponsored electric vehicle manufacturer, surpassed Tesla, like for the last year or two or whatever. But it turns out that their batteries can't handle that extreme cold, and it looks like they explode. Like legit, launch the cars 3 to 5 meters straight up in the air. Doors go flying out, directly out. They explode.
I mean, okay.
They straight up explode.
So let's not act like every fucking country in this world isn't skipping quality control and stress testing.
Oh yeah.
Because then we got fucking Boeing, who literally requested to get an exemption on their safety regulations for this fucking plane before they put it out, which is where I'm like, man, I remember when I was traveling a lot, like I would see cracks in the, like on the inside of the plane where it's like plastic parts where you're like, I don't think this is crucial to the infrastructure, but I'm just going to ignore it because
what can you do?
I can't really do anything about it. Right. I have to get to my destination. So I'm just going to put this out of my mind. But like seeing that Boeing
the hole in it
fucking come out, it shit didn't look real because my mind is like, oh, no, this is only the stuff that happens in nightmares. This doesn't happen in real life where like the window comes out and they have to land the plane. Like, no, that's in movies and like,
when I watched it, I thought to myself, man, Hollywood got this stuff pretty accurate. In terms of
they got the star arrangement correctly.
Yeah, like there are all sorts of things that they that they nail in terms of like this is what happens when an airplane partially deconstructs in any of these locations. Like it's almost like Hollywood listened to the engineers.
It felt hyper real.
It did. It didn't. At first, I thought I was like, "Wow, this is some really good CGI," and then I saw more and more. I thought
it was fake at first. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, no, it was. There was some. It just it didn't seem real. But that's the thing. So like the Chinese batteries that or the batteries that BYD uses, I'm pretty sure they're using the same cattle technology that Ford is heavily invested in that is coming to America. That's why I think it's interesting. China is heavily invested in all of the industries that are related to battery technology and solar, but they're really invested in battery technology. And there's a really big issue with their exporting electric vehicles into Europe because they're so heavily subsidized by the government. Like, how last week we were talking about how like maybe some of these batteries or electric cars are heavily subsidized by their government. Well, it turns out they are. At least in China, they're extremely subsidized by the government.
Yep, that makes complete sense. They almost would have to be at this point. But that's the government's job.
It is.
So that's why I'm like, our government shouldn't be under the restraint of making money when it comes to investing and things like that, because it's about future-proofing our species. So the idea that capitalism can perform as poorly as it does and then
still be getting awards.
But then also lead the discussion on where to go with everything. It's like at some point we were like close to the scientists being the discussion leaders and the thought leaders, but then like Joe Rogan came in and stole all their thunder by having them on. Ironically, he stole like all their thunder and accumulated it in a way that now it's like, do you remember when Michio Kaku was like everywhere?
Yeah. He used to be on my YouTube feed every day.
Constantly. And it's like
Every day. All the
it's
time.
before the Rogan um integration of Kaku's audience with the like ancient alien audience and stole both of the audiences. Both of those kind of like fell into Rogan's sphere, and now they're both part of the Rogan sphere and don't have their own identities. Where it's like before there was kind of this pseudo new age philosophical movement emerging kind of under Michio, but because Michio didn't really want to become like a cult leader, he never like galvanized anything behind him. So it's like all of the people that were like not into the fuck is that guy's name? The Indian dude. Oh my god.
Oh, Deepak Chopra.
Yes, Deepak Chopra. He was fucking everywhere for a minute. Anybody who wasn't into his bullshit was basically like in the Michio camp that didn't want to go as far as Deepak. And it's like, I remember right around that time, the way that they were both presenting their frameworks or viewpoints or whatever, it was like clear that Michio had the potential to like develop a cult following in the same way that Neil had the potential and kind of went with it, which eventually like was his own undoing. And I think that's anybody who does that, it becomes their own undoing, which is why I think Michio was smart not to do it. But it's also like
Every so often, I still see something where he's giving a talk or an interview.
oh yeah, he's still around.
He's still around. He still
not,
does it, but he's just not.
he's not like talking to millions of people
Yeah.
the way he was at one point. And it's like I don't think he necessarily cares one way or the other. Whereas like people like Joe Rogan definitely care because they can monetize it. Like Michio he wasn't trying to monetize it. Like I think he sincerely wanted to influence how people think about the world and think about approaching the unknown. Whereas Joe Rogan kind of cares about that, but he cares about his own pockets more, which is like, that's fine if it weren't for the fact that he then took the momentum of people like Michio and intelligently took their momentum of the people who didn't really want it and like ran with it. So it's like, you can't really condemn Joe Rogan for doing that. But it's like, unfortunately, a lot of people gave Joe Rogan their clout, not necessarily understanding what the end result would be. So I don't know if like Michio probably, if he reflects on it, he may have like done more long-term harm just by going on Rogan's show than any good he's done before or since. And that's like, I think that's a hard reality to deal with when like discussing somebody like Rogan, if just because now that we're like decades into the Rogan sphere existing, it's like
Rogan sphere. No. I'm following you, man. It's just it's not a sphere. It's all bulgy. It's taking steroids. It probably smells like it's a potato. It smells really weird.
It's definitely rotten.
It's a potato. We like potatoes. We're not anti-potato. Potatoes are delicious.
No. Yeah, that's why I was saying it's a rotten one. I don't want to insult potatoes. I'm not trying to insult potatoes.
You know, there was a time though like, I don't know even when it was. It seemed like he was trying to. It seemed like he was genuinely asking questions, but then he started providing platforms to people that. There's like a difference between listening to somebody's ideas and seeing what kind of compatibility they have with reality, and providing a platform to people that just espouse the worst kind of hateful rhetoric.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, he could not tell the difference, and thought one was the other.
I don't think he cared. And that's where I was like a part of his audience early on enough to where it was like Ustream was still his like main platform, because that's where we were still watching like Justin TV and Ustream. I think those were the because it was whenever the Scott Walker like Occupy Wall Street movement happened. It was like right around then when Rogan really started to blow up on his podcast.
Yeah.
And it was like, I think it was YouTube. I forget which one it was. Oh shit, yeah. And whenever he did the cancel Mencia thing too, around 2010, it was like there was a culmination of things, like between him getting Mencia canceled, ironically being one of the first actual only real cancel culture incidents that's ever existed, is him canceling Mencia for stealing a joke, or not a joke, stealing jokes. Because Mencia definitely stole a bunch of jokes and he admitted it. But it's like, there's that. There's the post Fear Factor. He was doing UFC commentary, and UFC blew up on Spike TV. So there's like a culmination of things that got Joe Rogan to like a bigger figure than he should have been. And I think part of it too was like old school media was like kind of falling to the wayside, and they were trying to figure out how to compete with short form video. And a lot of people hadn't transitioned to YouTube yet. So Joe Rogan really didn't have.
He didn't have any competition.
No, not like big names. Like Dane Cook had carved out this niche that like Joe Rogan came in and like siphoned off of that after Dane Cook sort of fell to the. I mean, it wasn't like a one-to-one thing, but I think Joe Rogan started like using Dane Cook's tactics, but with podcasting, because his specials just weren't that funny. And it's like, as much as, oh yeah, that too. Joe Rogan became a stoner later in life. So like 90% of his identity was about him smoking weed and being a stoner. And like, that resonates with college students. So it's like he got a bunch of college students into his comedy just because he discovered weed really late. And it was like, it was endearing at first, but then once he started like shilling other stuff, it became weird in a way where we're like, something's off about this guy. And then eventually there's a contradiction in Joe Rogan in that he like tried to get hair plugs at one point. he's like on testosterone replacement. But then he tries to act like he doesn't really care about like material things or like it, it's weird how he'll try to build this character on his like podcast show, but clearly the things that he's doing to his body and to in his personal life, there is an insecurity there that he tries to act like isn't there. And so that's where, to me, knowing what he was trying to portray versus what was really happening, especially when you had like started to bring on more and more Jordan Peterson type right wing bullshit, it was like, okay, I don't think this is for me anymore. So like, I think Yasi pointed out in that because it's like they were saying a lot more, you know, they say misogynist stuff it's not every show, but it just depends on who's on there. But it's like once you realize that he goes and like will play this intellectual act, even knowing damn well he's not an actual intellectual, which he'll like acknowledge and call out on other times when he's not trying to play that role. It's like, okay, I see the Kaufman-esque approach to what he's doing, and I understand that is not him on the podcast is not really like that's not like how Joe Rogan acts with around his kids or whatever, his wife. That's fine. But half of his audience, at least half, if not more, doesn't realize that. So they don't. And this is what I'm also realizing with rap is like there's a pro wrestling kayfabe element to some of these radio talk show hosts and like some of these artists that I think the audience either doesn't understand or doesn't want to acknowledge is fake. And then it trickles down into like us as regular people having to deal with the fallout of those people not knowing the difference between Joe Rogan, the podcast personality, and Joe Rogan, the person he is in real life, and the implications of him trying to portray one to entertain people. Because like if he just was like talking on the podcast the way he talks to his kids, it wouldn't be entertaining. That's fine. So like it's good that he's not trying to be the same person. But if his audience can't discern that, that's where the problem starts to arise. So I don't even know if it's like Joe Rogan's audience isn't his fault.
Yeah.
In some ways. Like Alex Jones's audience isn't his fault in some ways. In other ways, it is clearly their fault and their responsibility. But like grown Americans don't have enough media literacy to truly be exempt from responsibility. Like, and because they are adults and they have a responsibility to have media literacy. So that's where it's like you can't get the blame off because they're not media literate, because they have the responsibility for being media literate. So it's this like they're gonna claim, it's like when somebody gets grifted and they claim like, oh, I didn't know. Well, there's a thing called due diligence that people are supposed to do before they do things. And it's like when people don't do their due diligence, it doesn't absolve them of responsibility, but in a lot of Americans' minds, it does. And so it's like, it's difficult to navigate that discussion when talking about responsibility, because it's like, even if somebody's responsible, they're not going to necessarily believe they're responsible for various reasons. And specifically when it comes to like video games, I don't know if you remember when ESRB started rating games, but it's
Oh
like
yeah.
um it was basically parents trying to absolve themselves of the responsibility of having to check on what they're purchasing for their kids in many ways. And even then it was like kids were able to get around the MC7 or M7 sorry, M plus rating to buy the games, and then the parents were blaming the stores. So it's like once again they just weren't accepting responsibility. Like if a kid ends up with fucking Grand Theft Auto, it's the parents' fault. It don't matter how they fucking got it. It's the parents' fault. So it's like blaming the kid for getting a hold of media that the parent doesn't want is like another way to for the parent to absolve themselves of responsibility. But it's like, man, that's the same hypocritical pseudo Christian crowd that wants to claim responsibility for children for the adult, but then actually make the child seem like they need to be responsible for themselves. Meanwhile, if they really believe that they were responsible for that kid's sin, then they do a better job in the fucking first place instead of just letting it happen and then punishing the kid later, even though it was actually still their fault. So that's why I'm like, there's a lot of things about American pseudo Christianity and the sense of responsibility that is a lot of self delusion and then passing the onus of responsibility constantly onto somebody else. It's like with January 6th, this motherfucker is still acting like he didn't invoke these people to try to effectively take over government in his name. And that's where I'm like, that's that same shit. You can't be the goddamn leader of the free world in the way people describe it, be the actual sitting fucking president, talk a bunch of bullshit to your followers, and then be like, no, I had nothing to do with that. No, that wasn't me. They just did this shit on their own.
Well, he made an announcement the other night when he was talking about magnets and how he doesn't understand them really, or he made it very clear through his language that he doesn't understand how magnetism works, which makes me consider that he probably doesn't understand physics. But he made a pretty bold statement about the Navy's magnetic what do they call it, the slingshot system they used to launch airplanes on aircraft carriers. Like the Gerald Ford has a magnetic slingshot system, catapult. Even if it doesn't work, that's not the kind of thing that that should be discussed openly. That's not a political talking point. Who cares if it doesn't work? It doesn't. That's not the kind of information that civilians should have any access to, anyways.
Right.
And so, on some level,
I mean, at a certain point, though, some information is inactionable in that it don't matter if you fucking know it or not. You can't do shit with that information. Like the Anarchist Cookbook is
I remember that thing.
dangerous because it is actionable. Like somebody knowing how to build a nuclear bomb is actually not that dangerous because they won't have access to 99% of the things they need to
The
actually
raw uranium.
Right, exactly. Depleted uranium, because it has to be depleted, I think, even. Or no, I
It
guess
has to be
that's
refined.
yeah. Or
Depleted uranium
can't
is turned into
be
sabos.
right, but it can't be the like raw uranium. It has to be like either used or actively refined, and that takes a lot of time. So it's not even like you can find some fucking uranium, and then if it hasn't been refined, I think you're looking at like 6 months to
Well, you have to
years
have an enriching
potentially.
facility and all sorts of stuff. It's not like the kind of thing anyone can just do. We can't. You can't go digging in them our hills, find some uranium ore, and then chuck it into the reactor and hope it'll work.
Which yeah, so that's where I'm like, I'm
But in terms of like some group of people in the Middle East who have animus against the U.S. Navy, if they know that they can only launch so many aircraft in a given period of time, that could influence their strategy. That's all. These are. I don't think it's like a big deal, but it's also the kind of thing that I don't think that that's the kind of thing that a president should be or a presidential candidate should be talking about at all.
right. I mean, I don't think any. Here's the issue. I don't think anybody who's not a physicist or a specialist in electromagnetism should be talking about it because
Yeah.
in theory, like you and I know what magnetism is. In theory, we could understand concepts around it, but do we really understand magnetism in a way that we should be talking about it?
No. God,
No,
no.
absolutely.
That's advanced physics.
Not.
That's not just like.
Let alone somebody who's not even remotely familiar with electricity, electronics, and the exchange between the as us. So it's like on the one hand, because we're familiar with like audio equipment and audio equalization and like the equipment that is necessary, there's like a lot of things about electromagnetism that we definitely know and how those things work. But still, it's functional information. It's not necessarily
Oh no, it's all it's all
true
within the context
understanding.
of things that we have to do, not because we're physicists who are studying electromagnetism and specifically the kind of electromagnetism that launches airplanes.
That's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with not knowing that. But that's also why we're not trying to like tell a bunch of people about those things as if like we're authorities on the information specifically. Because that's where he went out of fucking line. Even like not only should he not be talking about it, he shouldn't be speaking on it as if he knows what he's talking about on that anything on that subject. Because it's I know a lot of civilians want to speak on military shit because it's cool. But when the president is like effectively commander in chief, it gives them a false sense of being in control of the military in a way where it's like, the fucking generals don't have to listen to you, right? Like they're just going along with it. So you like come in and sign off on whatever that the Congress is actually going to give them, knowing damn well you don't control the pocketbook. So everybody's just playing to make it feel like you have some control, and all the generals are just smiling and nodding.
They're just waiting for him to get out of the room.
Is like they're not listening to fucking your strategy on some shit. No. So I think there's like a delusion with some of these presidents that because the military plays theater in some cases more voluntarily than others. So like with W, he really thought he was in control. Everybody but him knew fucking Dick Cheney had more control than him, especially due to the connections with the defense contracting. So it's like, it's not, in that case, it's not even about like him usurping control within the government. He's usurping control outside the government and has had control, has had influence before he got in those government positions, which is arguably why he got in those government positions. So there's this element of like somebody like W deluding themselves into thinking that they are calling the shots is why he then got that. It was like a cowboy swagger that the people on the left mocked, but the people on the right embraced. And all the meantime, the military is behind the scenes, just like, oh, everybody's just eating this shit up. Him thinking he's calling shots, fucking landing planes on aircraft carriers and shit. Like it was the mission accomplished moment is the most theatrical moment in United States government history, aside from the Michael Bay films where he literally just had to get Pentagon approval on his scripts to then use their fucking whatever military equipment he asked for in the Transformers films. So it's like, even though that government moment actually happened in theaters, the mission accomplished moment, it's burned in anybody who saw its memory for good reason, because it, not just because obviously the war wasn't over and it was like the most cart before horse moment ever, but everybody realized it's like, this is him just like living out some. At that point, he's no better than Kim Jong-un trying to get everybody to fucking fake cry for his dad's death or whatever type of theater that United States media tries to say that North Koreans are subject and forced to go along with. That's the exact thing that everybody realized in that moment we were being subject to. So I do think that there's this element of, in modern times, there was a brief moment where people were made aware of the neo-feudalism and the domestic, I don't even know how you can, I want to call it domestic imperialism that is happening, but it's really just cannibalism on Americans that happened when military industrial complex ran out of other countries to parasitize. And that's like, once the United States had to turn internally and like prison industrial became the focus again, it was like they had to get more creative in how they built their prisons, so it wasn't even obvious that the prison was even going up, which is where I'm like, Indianapolis, that like 465 loop is like a prison now. And if you get stuck inside there, it's like you don't even realize your entire fucking city is a prison at this point, and you're being treated. There's worse levels of it that you can be sent to that are like actual jail and like actual prison. But the city itself is such a desolate, police monitored, actively patrolled place of citizens being harassed that they don't even realize it don't have to be like that. And it's like, when you try to get out of it, the closer you get to the edge, it's like the more and more difficult it gets. Like a heliopause or some shit where you're like, oh, I'm trying to leave the star system.
Why can't I get out? There's too much pressure.
Get out. And it's like, every time I go through there, I'm reminded of how worse it's gotten in my lifetime, and it's not getting any better. So I can only imagine in like another 40 years, if it continues on this trajectory, it's gonna actually be like one of those Judge Dredd dystopian places where it's like,
Oh, Mega
oh
City.
yeah, but like where just the cops are roaming, judging people left and right, and there's no real sense of law because the cops have gotten too much control at the individual level, so they treat it like they're all fucking judges. And it's like you Bloomington is like that when you go to IU's campus, but like as soon as you get off campus, it's like not nearly like that. So there's these like little borders of police uh police militarized zones that if you go in it, you're being monitored way more than is necessary for a non-criminal. Like if you're a regular citizen and you're being like under police monitoring the way that people in Indiana are in various capacities, it's like once that shit gets removed, the hyper vigilance that you realize you have to be constantly under to live in that, once it starts to go away and then you go back to Indiana, and then you're like, oh, this is what that thing is. And that's where it's like there's an element of everything doesn't every life experience doesn't have to cause stress, and every life experience doesn't have to cause pleasure. And there's like a wide range between distress, stress, pain, pleasure, all these different areas of experience. Indianapolis and Indiana in general puts people in these areas where they get so used to them, and it becomes like a base state where I'm like, you don't even realize that this shit is there until it's removed. And it's like this like fucking yoke that you've been wearing around your neck that you're like, oh shit, I feel like 10 pounds lighter now. And it's like, I know there's certain things where my parents like they don't give a fuck about the traffic. Like they've gotten so used to it that that's Monday or Tuesday for them, that they have to sit in that. It's like LA traffic with Bloomington roads. And that's where I think Bloomington is, it's like getting overgrown in a way where the campus, okay, IU has gone through growing phases, and every time they went through a growing phase, it was like they were themed. Now the theme is just growth. And it's like that it's like accelerating the growth out of control in a way. If you don't go downtown, you wouldn't even know it's happening. And it's not even a problem. It's not a problem outside of downtown. So it's this element of over by like the east side, in the closer you get to the center of the city, the more it starts to become dense with growth for the sake of growth. And that's where I'm like, everything can't be apartment buildings and banks. Eventually, that means that all the people living in those apartments and banking in those places are going to have to be working in other places outside of those. So then you have people fucking traveling to like Ellettsville and Unionville and other places now to work. And you have people from those places traveling into Bloomington to work because they didn't want to live in the city. Man, it's like, are you familiar with white flight?
Yes.
So white flight has like destroyed America in a way where I'm like, I think it's hilarious to watch the decades later repercussions of it happening and like negatively affecting white people. Because when white people flew from the cities, I don't think that their end goal was to be spending 60% of their lives in the car. I don't think that was the end goal. And what's funny to me is like cars then had to keep up with this necessity in terms of being status symbols, but also the car has to be like, you're going to be spending 60%, if not 80% of your waking time in this vehicle for some reason. So like, it's got to be nice. And so people needing to spend that much to keep up with that expectation. Now I'm realizing like some of these people's car payments are like more than our rent. And then their insurance makes it like even more than that. So what people have had to do to keep up appearances for the sake of not living around Black people is like they're burning up so much extra energy, but then also living in their cars so much more of their life where I'm like, I think it's hilarious to see this as the repercussion for effectively racist people who didn't realize that like yeah all you can't have like an economy with all white people that's going to sustain itself because then it's like there's going to be a segment of that society that they don't want to work and then they're going to have to employ people that they think are below them to do those jobs and eventually now it's not white people doing whatever job that is. And so it's been amazing to see white people try to like use Black people's labor, but keep a distance from Black people. And then when they didn't want to do that, try to turn to like Mexican people and like use Mexican labor, but keep a distance from Mexican people. So there's like, in the process, they didn't just do it to Black people. They didn't just do it to Mexican people. They didn't just do it to Chinese people. So like, they didn't just do it to Irish people. Like they've done it to enough communities now to where those communities have then started talking amongst each other to then be like, oh, I see what's happening. So as long as we don't like let them come in and push us out of our communities, they can't do that to us again. And so now white people have to gentrify other white people, and it's happening in like the rural areas. And it's like that's what's happening in Bloomington. Like the overgrowth that's happening is white people gentrifying other white people. Because if you look at where the prices are being jacked up or the people that are getting pushed out of the neighborhoods, it's not people of color. It's like white people. So that's where, to me, it's also then funny because they're so hyper focused on like Bloomington that then once you like get out of it's that like greater Bloomington is going to become a thing in a way that now greater Indianapolis is like, what's it called? Bedford is going to, be its own thing. Ellettsville, like they have their own identities. If somebody's from Ellettsville and they try to say they're from Bloomington, somebody from Bloomington is going to be like, no, you're not. And it's only going to get even more defined in that now Bloomington sort of like hyper developing. It's spilling over into those areas. I've already seen it, and like um the houses in Ellettsville are like really nice. Like a lot of the new construction that's gone up in Ellettsville is like houses you wouldn't anticipate would be in like Ellettsville. So you're like, if you go to the older parts of Ellettsville, it's like, oh yeah, it looks like a fucking trailer park or
So
know.
Ellettsville's kind of interesting. There's a significant portion of it that's all floodplain, and because it was all the development was so dense, so tight on top of itself initially. I think it makes it difficult for them to expand any infrastructure. So that's why there's more development between Ellettsville and Bloomington. There's like that whole commerce area that's between.
Oh yeah.
Like that's all new. That's all relatively like really within the last 20 years type stuff. But like real Ellettsville, old Ellettsville, that place is like, it's got its own charm, but it's also like, floodplain central. So we looked at a place up in that part of Monroe County when I was looking for the house a little bit over a decade ago, and we found this really neat. It was like a pole barn that had a dance studio in it, and the part of me kind of used to think, man, that'd have been kind of fun to have for because it wasn't expensive. It was just gonna be real weird, and also there's this whole unfinished area underneath it that was just full of raccoon shit. That was also going to be pretty weird.
Yeah, that's never a good sign.
Yeah, no. And here's the fun part. The guy that helped us find my home, this guy Jim Sprague, he and his father built that pole barn and had a wood shop in it. The building had 3-phase power and really big mirrors. Like I said, dance studio. It would have been a pretty interesting place to live for like a few years as a single person who wants to stay up late and lose all sense of time, that kind of stuff. But I'm glad I didn't go with that. The whole the basement area can flood when it rains, and that just screams mold problems to me, at least. I don't want to deal with that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
it's pretty interesting though. There's actually like a big swath of land around it that is really pretty, like untouched Indiana wilderness type stuff.
Yeah, it is. I mean, there's a lot of untouched wilderness in general. I think that's where like if it feels like humans have destroyed the planet, but in reality most of it's untouched.
Yeah.
It's just hard to see.
Well, the only places that we can go are generally by way of vehicle, and there's always a power line next to a road because power lines go near roads because it's easier to set them up if there's a road nearby. So of course, anywhere anyone's going to be able to drive, there's going to be signs of civilization. You have to walk away a little while, and then it disappears. No, you're right though. Like when I pull up like Google Maps and I switch to satellite view, and sure, if you're looking at a city up close, you can see all the development, and it's crazy. It looks like a circuit board. But as soon as you zoom out, till you can see the scale says 5 miles, and it's like an inch. Well, it's an inch on the screen that I'm looking at, but all of a sudden it's all green. And you can see some roads, kind of, because they're indicated. And there are a few swaths of development that are just kind of specks. But the vast majority of it it's all green. Yeah, when the key says 100 miles, can't see anything other than the Earth. Let me see if I can go to China and see the Great Wall. Nope. The Great Wall is not visible on Google Earth with a scale at 100 miles. So, no, I spoke too soon. There's some things that definitely look like strip mines in China. Like geometric shaped pools and discolored spaces.
So it looks like it feels like we hit the bottom of the GPU market.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't know if the prices are going to start going up again necessarily, but I don't know if they're going to get any lower. Like there's speculation that they're going to start going up again, but I think the issue is that they're more flexible than CPUs. So that's like, the AI boom is like getting the GPU market going again. So it's like, it's
it looks like back in October, NVIDIA cut production. They halted production of their RTX 4000 series.
Yeah, because I don't think they were selling.
Yeah, they need the market needs to absorb the existing supply before they let people have access to the big, juicy, spicy GPUs. Oh, okay. So in November, NVIDIA stock it started to drop, and it looks like there may be a correlation to the gaming market has bottomed out. Like people aren't just they've discovered that I don't even need a 3000 series card to play these games.
Yeah, it's wild. I think
I can get by on a 2050 or 2060. I can get by on a 1660. Oh, I can get by on a 1060.
I think there's like it's like this weird line between what's possible and what's being executed.
Yeah.
It's like what's possible in gaming is like in people's minds it would need a 4090. It would need the upper end of what the GPU could offer. But when you optimize something and then it's like actually something that makes it to the market as a AAA game, nothing is actually that high in utilizing the cards, because it would take so much investment to get a game to that point that no studio is like investing that much for less than 10% of the market, because only like 1 to 4% of the people in the market are going to be rich enough to own that card. So you can't really even, if you're trying to sell a game, you can't cater to the smallest audience unless you're trying to charge $250 a game or some shit. So I
mean, maybe for like 2 or 3 seconds during an entire session of gameplay, so somebody might utilize full capability of their GPU for a given, not for gameplay when all hell breaks loose and the screen's going crazy and maximum bloom and shading effects. Oh, I know. No. I mean, like a 2000 series card.
Yeah, I mean,
like maybe.
Yeah, like even because this is where a 2080 Super.
That's a lot of video card.
I mean, but not really when you're talking about if you're going to compare it to like a 3070 or a 4070 even. Like now the 2080 Super is like not that much. It's like a lot of card, but because of the way that the GPU market has evolved, that what was the top of the line once is like now the kind of the middle.
Yeah, but it's still
of the
more than
upper
enough for
tier.
the vast majority of games. Like, except for maybe that 1 to 3 seconds of gameplay during it.
But then the problem is those cards never really came down that much in cost in terms of, because they were the upper end then, Nvidia wasn't going to turn around and be like, okay, now that it's cheaper to make 2080 Supers, we're going to saturate the market with them. No, they didn't. Like, they moved on to the 30 series. So like they're the market is only going to have been as saturated with 2080 Supers as much as Nvidia's output, and not like according to the capacity to put those things out. So then even now I was looking at 2080 Super desktops, and they're like still like $1,000 or like $1,200. You would think it would be a lot cheaper than that because it's like an older card, but it's like the bottom lines of these things I think they've bottomed out to a point where it's like, even though okay, but that's
No, that makes
like,
sense. They can't sell it for less because they've got too much in it. They're going to end up paying taxes on it at the end of the year if they're not careful.
As a user, I'm going to go buy an $800 3070 computer instead of the 2060 Super at $1,000. So that the 2080 Super, sorry. So that 2080 Super is going to continue to sit there as these other cars get cheaper and more powerful.
Yeah.
And it's never going to get bought because they can't go too much lower and without taking a huge hit, because whenever they procured it the first time, it was like way higher than it is even now. And it's like,
yeah, no, they're quickly approaching their actual investment.
Yeah. Because I think those, they would have been like a $1,700. I don't know what they were at the time, but they would have been closer to the high end of the market. So that card alone, if you bought it, which is not even that long ago, that's what's so crazy to me, is like
4 years ago.
Yeah, that's not that long ago.
4 years ago.
But the market, the GPU market moved so quickly because of crypto and now subsequently because of AI that it got ahead of itself in a way that now they're realizing that they oversaturated the market. So it's like, I don't know if they can do that ever again, but that's why that's why to me I feel like we are past the bottom and like about to go in an upswing of the GPU market that will never go as low as it was like last summer ever again. But it's like we're not far off from last summer. So I'm not being like, this is like the actual, I think the best window, like ending now is the best window to get GPUs, in that once the reduction in production catches up and then the AI boom catches up, GPUs are going to get jacked up again, and people aren't even going to see them because they're going to be going to these private companies in like fucking AI farms.
Yeah. Well, maybe the next iteration of computing will come soon enough that we can just put on a headset and lay back in our reclining chair and have everything beamed straight into our brains through our eyes, ears. And somehow and the system can take instructions from this, headset contraption. Eye tracking stuff, or, there's a way this all works. I may have also watched that terrible Bruce Willis movie Surrogates recently.
Yeah, that's
It was so bad.
reaching around the head to scratch the nose philosophically. It's like I don't
Reaching
Ready Player
between one's
One.
own legs to pat themselves on the back.
And also these things are like dystopian.
Yeah.
So we're not meant to be trying to get to like the Ready Player One world.
Oh,
Like
heavens
nobody
no.
should want to be that um detached from reality. Like that's a problem. Like, and I've consumed lots of different types of media in my lifetime. Immersion is not about the quality of the graphics or sensory input even. And that's where I'm like, the notion that we have to have sensory accurate information that's completely cutting off our connection to the real world to get the like most immersive experience. I don't even know if that's philosophically
I don't think
accurate
it's
or
necessary.
true. Right.
It's only
Exactly.
useful for a
Exactly.
few things. Like if I want to control a remote operated automaton on a mining at a mining operation in space, and I don't want to get out of the safety of the spaceship, but I need to control some kind of machine. I would like an immersive environment that puts me in the cockpit of the environment, not just like in a chair with a screen in front of me, but something that accurately reflects what that environment should be like. But that's completely different from like laying in my recliner with a headset on and a straw feeding me liquid, whatever soilant. Yeah, I don't need a tube of soilant going into my gut and another one with water like dripping in and an IV drip or something like that, so I can sit there and work on a database all day long. That's like that would ruin computing, I think, actually, now that I think about it like that. Because that's what it ends up. There'd be a simulated office environment where people would just sit at a desk and compute instead of actually sitting at a desk. Virtual desk. They tried that. Didn't they with the Oculus thing? There was like
Yeah, it didn't work.
yeah, it failed miserably because nobody wants to pretend to be at a desk when they're already at a desk.
Right.
Who wants to pretend to be at a different desk when you're sitting at your own desk? That's like the worst. No, you can't even use a real keyboard. You just have to wave your fingers in the air. Magic hands. Got those jazz hands. I remember there was this like laser optical scanning, field scanning keyboard that projected a keyboard onto like any flat surface, and you interacted with it and could type with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I always thought, like, what happens if someone has like fingernails that just slightly interrupt, or what if somebody's typing is actually based upon the feedback one gets from a physical keyboard? I mean, I've tried typing on an iPad and it sucks.
Yeah, I think that's why people don't generally use them for actual typing.
I think that's going to be one of the big hurdles for any kind of immersive computing environment, is that the physical motions don't always jibe with what's going on in the visual framework. Also, I'm really used to being able to operate a computer with like essentially twitching my wrist to move a mouse. I don't want to have to move my whole damn arm.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know if you ever tried the like leap motion sensor.
I had one of those.
So I had one as well, and it was like it was an eye-opening experience to realize that like the keyboard and mouse is effectively the most optimized user interface
For a broad
that
range
we
of
have
tasks.
for like the most broad range,
Yeah.
which is where like that's why we always default back to it in terms of like, yeah, this isn't the first time new interfaces have been created, but it's just this is, as you're saying, there's like even when you get down to like the trackball versus like the um laser mouse, it's like there's even more refined ways to make that experience easier, but some,
But a trackball is only more useful for a short list of use cases.
right. And that's where it's like seeing the way that people like try to over uh, correct on this or then try to innovate beyond it. It's like every time it just goes back. And it's
Like the thing about the Leap device that I thought was interesting was that it made me feel like any screen was a touch screen. But at the same time, I don't want to reach out and touch my screen all the time. I don't want to have to reach out and point at things either when I'm using a computer. There were some games, some visually intense or visually stimulating games that were all based off of gestures, and that stuff was kind of cool for like 20 minutes. It was a good idea. It was fun, but it reminded me of this I can't even remember what the controller was called. It was for Nintendo. It looked like a laptop with two infrared panels, and you held your hands out in front of it. There was one game you could play that was fun. It was like what was that? Spy Hunter, I think. There's like one, it was, or maybe it was a flying game even, but you had to hold your hands out in front of this little field above above one panel and in front of the other panel, and you basically raise your hands or move them back and forth to get them to issue various commands. And it was only cool in theory, and then after the first time you play with the thing, it's like, oh, this is actually really tiring. I don't like holding my arms directly out in front of me for this long. What else could I possibly be doing right now other than this? I'm gonna go do that. And I think that's the same issue with a lot of computer interfaces. Unless they're either highly specialized and they do one thing so well that you wouldn't think about using any other thing for that task, like a MIDI keyboard if you're trying to do composition. Sure, there are other ways to enter MIDI data, but none of them are as efficient for entering note values. And but you wouldn't want to use a musical keyboard to write a term paper. You probably could. You absolutely could, but it would be kind of a pain in the ass. And you absolutely can enter MIDI data with a QWERTY keyboard, but you lose a lot of the discrete control over various control change information. But I can't see anywhere where I want to start waving my hands in front of the screen. I have touchscreens too. It's not like I don't have touchscreens, like for computers, and they're fine for some things. Like when there's one application that dominates the entire computer, that's the only thing that ever gets used, and it's touch. It was designed with touch in mind. Those things are great because those will actually allow you to, interact with it like it's almost hardware. But I only have one computer that I need to set up like that. I don't even think my other touchscreen monitor is hooked up with USB to function as a touchscreen monitor.
yeah,
I think the
it's
touchscreen thing is like a lost cause. Like tablets, sure, that makes sense to touch a tablet, but a touchscreen computer?
but even then a tablet is like
Just
You want to
a
use this thing that's got fucking thumbprints all over it when you go use your monitor?
I don't know. Tablets are
With
nice
like,
when I want to sit on the couch and read something.
but I mean, okay. So on that note, I understand that, but because of the way backlighting works,
Yeah.
a Kindle is you're just gonna or a Kindle type device is still gonna be superior.
Oh, always.
So it's like that even that specific thing, it's like they're not even the best at that. So
I have a tablet to control a bass amplifier because it has software. It has software control capabilities that don't exist on an actual desktop or laptop computer operating system. Pisses me off so much. That's one of the things that I actually don't like about the ubiquity of mobile devices and mobile computing is that there are some things that, by every right, like, are professional grade tools, but are somehow hamstringed and can only be, you know, their software control only exists on a tablet or a phone, and not on an actual computer. So if I want to have like rapid control over the capabilities of one of these super amplifiers that does great things, really, really exciting stuff, I have to have an additional computing device that is essentially a child computer. I'm sure there's somebody out there who who does all their coding on their tablet, but they lack the hardware support for the vast majority of industrial grade hardware, unless the software is specifically designed to control that hardware, and then that's again forcing somebody to use a child computer. I do like tablets, though. I'm not gonna lie. There are a lot of things about them that are very nice. Like when I don't want to have to power on a full-fledged computer to read something or to check my email, and I want to look at something bigger than my phone, or when I want to share information and I don't want to turn on a computer, and there's no television nearby that can mirror the screen. I think that's actually one of those like killer features that every television needs to have, like, natively. Any phone should be able to connect to and stream to a TV.
I think a lot of them do.
I know. I mean, I think that it's always
Since,
through
like 2018.
Yeah, like anything that has built-in Roku or a smart TVs. Yeah. They usually have some kind of Miracast or Apple Cast support. But that's definitely a killer feature. I hate having to crowd around somebody to like look at something on their phone.
Yeah, I haven't encountered a TV that hasn't had one in a while.
Yeah. Let's see, one. I've got two. Yeah, I have two televisions that don't have any kind of smart capabilities, and those things have no internal streaming powers, but those are both like first generation 4K TVs. And that was still when Rokus were external, and before Chromecast existed, before like they were, a Roku device was the size of a jump drive, which is also really cool. I like that a lot. I had one of the first Apple TV like variations when they were still the size of like a Mac Mini nowadays. I loaded a variation of OS 10 on it. Like, I think at the time it was like they'd finally started using like national parks, or they stopped using animals and they were starting to use locations. And I loaded up like OS 10 4. Whichever one Tiger was. It was so deadly slow. It was like the slowest computer of all time. And then I put the original hard drive back in and sold it. Everything was fine. I get the impression that those days of porting an operating system into an unknown, or at least OS 10 or any of the Apple software to like some other kind of hardware, those are completely over now.
So it's weird. Like I've had multiple tablets. I've tried, and it seems like the only time I really used it was for a specific application.
Yeah.
That didn't like it was like either use the tablet or use my phone, and obviously the display is bigger on the tablet than the phone, so it was better on there. And it's like I just never really found anything that was like the screens on a laptop that have the like no glare on it. I feel like I've always preferred that to the gloss screen of the tablet anyway. So it's like it seems like it became, like many things, it's like a preference where that's perfectly valid reason to do something in terms of like if you prefer to use a tablet over a phone or prefer to use a tablet over a laptop, there's nothing wrong, or that's a perfectly valid reason. And that's where I'm like, it always felt like to me it was a solution looking for a problem rather than the opposite, which is like, a lot of tech is like that. So I don't think it was unique to tablets or anything. But I also think like the people, like our parents who were buying them didn't know why they were buying them, and then they moved on to like Chromebooks, thinking that Chromebooks are actual computers. And so the like tablet market is moved on, is what I seem to observe.
2. Let's see here. Yeah, there's like 2 applications that I have on this tablet that exist. 3, 4. There are 4 applications that exist on this tablet that fulfill that whole goal of like, I need to do this thing, or I want to do this thing. 2 of which are dedicated to hardware. One is a Rebirth emulator, and then the application that controls my wireless mesh system it's available for mobile devices, but not for a computer. So it's easier on the tablet than it is on my phone. Actually, I prefer Google News on a tablet or on a phone than to the web interface. Because on the tablet or the phone, on the app version, when I say, show me less of this, or I don't want to see this source, it actually seems to respond. Whereas the desktop interface, if I say, I don't want any more, I don't want more of this, or I want less of this, or don't show me this source, it doesn't give a shit. It just keeps showing me more of the same. There's no way around that, though. I've tried. I've complained to Google many times. They don't listen. Which is not surprising. Google not listening. Actually, that is surprising because they're always listening.
They just don't listen to you directly.
But they do.
It's like if you want to speak to them, you have to like...
You just say it really subtly in the background.
Be talking to one of your friends and then be eavesdropping, yeah. It's just like...
Oh, I got it. So I was thinking about buying this thing that I found through a Google search, but then they kept showing me news articles that I didn't want to see, and so I didn't buy it. Maybe they'll listen now. Who's paying $1,600 for a 4090? Who's spending $1,200 on a 4080 card?
some jackass. You know, at this point, I don't know. I don't know
I don't even
who's
know what
doing
kind of
that,
computer user that actually is.
right?
I can't even think of any. I mean, I'm sure that Crysis runs in like full tilt on a 4090, but who actually like plays that game like that? Because almost everyone that I've ever met who plays like first person shooters like really seriously, a lot of them will turn down some of the effects so you can
I
see.
mean, you know, I think that's part of it is you can turn down the effects to get faster frame rates, but when your computer's powerful enough, that doesn't matter. So it's like,
No,
um,
I mean just so that like you're not being distracted by bloom effects.
for sure, but it's also they can then run it at like 240
Yeah,
frames, like
yeah, and then see all the
so.
detail. That's like
Yeah,
that's like that always that makes sense to me. Like I always turn I the only time I turn on the like full bloom when I'm playing like Star Trek or Eve is when I want to see what a new device does. But half the time during any kind of really heavy gameplay, as soon as the screen starts lighting up, I can't see anything. It all goes haywire. Maybe I need one of those like screens that does that crazy high resolution and sync rate stuff. What is it, the G Sync or something? Maybe I needed to like experience gaming on one of those things. I would have thought that like 120 hertz would be sufficient, but it's not.
no, it's definitely not. And the only issue is like because other people are not playing at that, they're getting frames that you're not
Yeah,
if you're
yeah.
playing online. So it's like on the one hand, it's not really fair that that limitation exists for some people if they're trying to play on the same platform as others where it's like, yeah, that's, you know, it's always been like that to a degree, even
Oh
in
no, it's always been an issue of
like
technology.
consoles.
Like every
Like,
time I was ever at a LAN party and there was somebody who dominated, it's because they had like the most finely tuned machine in the room. It was rarely an issue of like someone being more skilled at the game. It was always like that person had like the most perfectly matched or spec'd system, and they were had it dialed in. I remember this guy had a monitor that was one of the displays from an airport. It was the kind that had all of the times, so it was I think it would support really absurd resolutions. Like, I mean, it was a 4x3, and I think it was like a 32 by 2400 resolution, big old tube type monitor. But it was so fast. You could play games on it, and there was no tearing at all. It was just a giant display. It weighed like 400 or 500 pounds.
well, the wild shit about tearing is unless you set vertical sync on, you can see tearing happen above 60 frames per second. So like if your computer like gets out of sync with the screen, you'll see a tear even if your computer's like actually fast enough to do more than
Oh, sure.
60 frames per second. It's just like that's where like having the monitor on the same frequency as the computer actually makes a huge difference, which is like it's it's subtle things like that that you can't even really see until you get into like either super powerful or super weak. It's like one or the other.
The thing about that, I remember this thing that was so cool about that monitor is that it was like had dials, like the horizontal and vertical sync were actually dials that you had to turn with like precision tools, and you would measure. He had like had probe locations, so you could test the voltage as you were doing it. It was very neat. It was not a consumer electronics device. God, I bet that thing gave people cancer, though. You know, there's a lot of old technology that I wonder about now. It's like, what would that stuff really do? Because I know that a lot of those old green screens, those things essentially sterilized the computer scientists who use them. There were a lot of cases of like radiation exposure during the early days of computer hardware development.
I mean, how many people stand right in front of their fucking microwave when it's cooking? Like, I don't give a shit what people say. It's gotta radiate something. It can't, and that won't necessarily be far, but like the glass isn't gonna stop that shit.
You know, maybe there's like a sweet spot where if you sit just the right, stand just the right distance, it like prevents cancer.
I'm assuming it's it's not that high powered,
No.
so it's like it's gonna drop off fairly quickly once the drop off happens. But like, there's a lot of people that just stand.
Oh, they'll get right up on it.
Like the light glowing on their face, watching their shit bubble, and you're like, "Is it done yet? Is it done yet?" Like, motherfucker, you're done. But that's where, again, I definitely, whether CRT monitors or televisions or like other electronics that have questionable electromagnetic bleed, it's like with cell phones, it's like I'll carry it in my pocket, but I don't want to carry it on my person unless I'm not somewhere where I don't have to. And it's like, I know over time, there's definitely the likelihood that there's going to be some weird cumulative effect from having this like walking Wi-Fi receiver and transmitter constantly near my person. But at the same time, it's like, it's easy. The crazy shit is if like other people's Wi-Fi signals are also giving me the same effect, not using a cell phone isn't going to get rid of it. So I think there's this element of like, when there's whatever number, however many million people driving a car, it's like, oh, me not driving isn't going to stop pollution, so I guess I'll keep driving. It's not just about polluting or potentially irradiating oneself, that I think people get stuck in these like.
Maybe we should start some kind of. We should sell those kilt purses, those sporns. We should sell those as like cell phone bags, mobile device carriers. We can
but then it's like, if it gets too like, say you want to be like, okay, this will protect you from the radiation. Well, then is it going to block the signal? Like, because you could go full Faraday cage in one of those carrying cases.
No. Quite the opposite. I'm trying to encourage people to irradiate themselves.
Oh no!
I mean, natural selection and stuff.
Yeah.
Here, wear this transmitter next to your junk for the rest of your life. You'll be okay.
Yeah.
I would like to see a mobile device where the screen is a transparent photovoltaic array, so that when you're not using it, you can point it towards the sky and it would charge itself from the sun. I think that should be doable.
I mean, it's like, on the one hand, I think they have those, but on the other hand, it's like, I have a portable solar panel.
Yeah,
where
I know. I just want it all in one thing. Maybe they just need to build it into the case.
Of course. But that's where I'm like, on the one hand, it's like, I when I bought this watch, they have a solar powered version that will add 2 weeks of charge with the solar panels, but you still have to charge it anyway. It's extra $100, and I'm like, I could just get a solar panel for like 30, and then rechargeable or that portable solar panel I can use with other things, and it's been like a much better like integration of solar charging to have just like a portable charger than having it on every device, because it's like I think
I'm thinking of like the size. You remember how big the solar panel was on like a pocket calculator? Like that's the kind of size I'm thinking. Like
then it's going to take way longer. Which then, when you're talking about a smartphone,
well, then make the smartphone use less electricity.
But it's only going to be able to reduce the usage so much, because then you're going to be like, well, now you're taking away the screen. So it's like, it's a trade-off, because then the portable charger I have has 3 panels, so it's going to charge.
Oh, yours is like yours folds out.
Okay. Yeah, and it's going to charge the smartphone way faster than any solar panel that would have been on the smartphone itself or on my watch.
I guess I'm thinking like I want something the size of like the ones on the old Casio pocket calculator, and I want the mobile device to consume so little power that that's enough juice that it can run off of like the ambient light from a incandescent bulb in the opposite corner of the room.
Well, and if you what ended up
that's a big
ask,
I realize.
Is a lot of those were using rechargeable batteries in tandem with that solar panel, so it wasn't even just a solar panel.
Sure.
And it's no, not sure. This is where a lot of like, until you took them apart, that's not what they were selling. Like, they were selling it as if it was only a solar panel charging that Casio.
Oh yeah, no, we're never gonna be able to get away from like batteries at this point.
Well, but what I'm saying is the only reason I know that it was also using batteries is because I watched a video of somebody who took a bunch of them apart to see how many of them that claimed to be a solar panel battery had it. And there were a couple that only had solar panels, but it was like 8 out of 10 of them had rechargeable batteries in addition. So it wasn't just a solar panel. So that's what I mean. Like, some of them were only solar, but the large majority of them weren't. So it's a matter of the solar panel on its own can do so much, where sometimes you need to have a battery to charge additionally to make that solar panel as effective as it possibly can be.
Oh, well, no, it would still need to have a battery, because we want to be able to use our phones as flashlights, apparently.
Of course, but that's where then the size of the panel starts to have a trade-off versus how much of the phone internal parts can be the battery, how much can be the operating system, how much can be the flashlight. And that's where I mean, like, eventually it just became easier to be like, I'm just going to get this portable solar panel that has 2 outlets. And then that's like, oh, it's 2 devices with with more solar capacity than any of them on their own could provide with an individual solar panel.
Yeah.
And that's where it's like, on the one hand, the capacity to do something isn't necessarily the best implementation of it, even if it's all in one. And that's where it's like, I think we have to iterate to then know like which actually the most functionally useful version of a device. Is it just, because here's the thing, what's the most functional now is to just have the battery and then put the solar panel elsewhere to charge that battery, because you're better off devoting more of your device to battery than to solar panel in a world where these devices use so much energy, because you can get a higher voltage discharge off of a battery directly than a solar panel currently. And that may change, at some point, but just currently right now, the battery is the most effective, like, usage of space. And that's where I'm like, that could easily change with some, major change in the solar panels that, and who knows how soon that could happen.
Exceptional Radio.
Exceptional Randos show is produced live in Sunroom Studios' Base Capsule. Remember to catch our Exceptional Randos live stream on YouTube every Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening.
Well, that was random. Exceptional